The Colorado River Basin is supposed to be building its snowpack right now. April is peak snow season in the Rockies. Instead, 18 monitoring stations that have never been bare on April 1st are reading 0. Colorado just recorded its warmest March in 132 years of tracking. And 300 miles downstream, Lake Mead is dropping 3.5 feet per month, heading toward a level where Hoover Dam loses 70% of its power output. So how did the largest reservoir in the United States end up here, falling faster than it has since the crisis year of 2022, with no snowpack to save it and no political deal to manage the decline? 2 years ago, the picture looked completely different. Lake Mead had just climbed 36 feet off its all-time low, boosted by a record snowpack winter and a landmark water-saving deal among the lower basin states. Headlines declared the comeback. The system had bent, but it held. The crisis felt over. That recovery is now almost entirely gone. And the situation replacing it is worse than the one the recovery was supposed to fix. Consider what the comeback actually took. Record snowpack. At 158% of normal, a 3 million acre-foot water-saving deal backed by $4 billion federal dollars from the Inflation Reduction Act. Tribal water deals, particularly with the Gila River Indian community and Colorado River Indian tribes, that added 11 vertical feet of reservoir recovery. Arizona slashing its usage by 32%, California hitting its lowest usage since 1949. All of that produced a 36-foot rise. The math was clear even then. 4 to 5 good snow years in a row would be needed to truly restore the system. The basin got one. Then the snow disappeared. Lake Mead sits at roughly 1,061 feet above sea level this week, about 33% full. The white mineral bathtub ring wrapping the reservoir walls stretches 160 feet above the waterline. The lake dropped from 1,066 feet at the end of February to 1,062 feet by the end of March, 3.5 feet in 30 days. And the rate is speeding up. In the single week ending March 29th, the lake fell 1.47 feet, more than double the pace of the week before. That kind of speed up normally happens in summer, when downstream demand peaks and desert evaporation eats the surface. Not in March. Not when runoff season is supposed to be starting. And that brings us to the detail that turns a worrying decline into something never seen before. The snowpack that is supposed to stop this drop, the frozen reservoir sitting in the Rocky Mountains that melts every spring and sends water downstream into Lake Mead, is not coming this year. It is barely there at all. Russ Schumacher is Colorado's state climatologist. This spring, the numbers on his screens are worse than any previous year on file. 130 SnowTel monitoring stations across the Colorado headwaters are reading 0 percentile stored snow water. That means the current snowpack is lower than every single previous year in the entire period of record. Not in the bottom 10%, below everything ever measured. This is the worst year for Colorado snowpack in recorded history. Statewide stored snow water on April 1st averaged just 3.3 inches. 22% of the 30-year average. The previous worst was 9.1 inches in 2012. Of 64 snow course sites with at least 50 years of data, 60 recorded their lowest ever readings. Bare rock and dried grass where there should be feet of packed snow. Peak snowpack hit on March 9th, nearly a month early, at just 51% of the average peak. Then the melt began, sped up by a March that shattered temperature records. Burlington hit 99 degrees, breaking the state's all-time March high. This mix of warmth and dryness is what makes 2026 different from every previous bad year. Ben Livney, a water scientist at the University of Colorado, has been pulling apart the link between temperature and snowpack across decades of data. Past dry years were not this warm. Past warm years were not this dry. 2026 is a first-of-its-kind mix of both. And here is what makes that pattern so dangerous for 40 million people downstream. Colorado's moisture through January was actually 89% of normal, close to average. It just did not come as snow. The record warmth turned it into rain, particularly below 8,000 feet. Water hit the ground and either evaporated or soaked into parched soil rather than building the frozen reservoir the system depends on. A dry year is a setback. A warm year that turns snow into rain is a pattern shift. The collapse is not limited to Colorado. Southeastern Utah is reading just 22% of average stored snow water, the worst in the region. The Dirty Devil River Basin sits at 40%. The Price and San Rafael basins at 42%. The Animas and San Juan headwaters, which feed directly into Lake Powell, are in the mid-40s. Utah and Colorado are both living through their lowest snowpack on record. NASA satellite images show snow-covered area across the entire upper basin at roughly 40% of typical early March coverage, the lowest since satellite tracking began in 2001. Every one of those basins feeds the same two reservoirs, and those reservoirs are already running low. Spring runoff, the seasonal pulse of snowmelt that normally fills Lake Powell and Lake Mead between April and July, is forecast at just 27% of normal. Total water year inflow to Lake Powell is projected at 46% of the long-term average, revised downward by 550,000 acre-feet from the prior month's forecast alone. Water data analyst John Fleck has been laying this year's snowpack curves over every previous year on record. 2026 is tracking worse than 2002, which produced the lowest inflow year in the modern record. That forecast is the number that turned the politics of the Colorado River from difficult to desperate. 7 states share the Colorado River under a patchwork of deals and backup plans stretched across the better part of a century. Every single one of those governing documents, the 2007 interim guidelines, the 2019 drought plans, and the deals with Mexico, expires on December 31st of this year. The Bureau of Reclamation must issue a record of decision by October 1st. That is less than 6 months from today. The 7 states have missed every single deadline leading up to that date. November 11th of 2025, for an early agreement, missed. February 14th of 2026, for a final 7-state proposal, missed. The negotiators walked away from a December 2025 summit in Las Vegas with nothing to show for it. They walked away from a February 2026 meeting with less than nothing, trading blame in press statements the same afternoon. The fight comes down to a question that sounds simple and is anything but. Who takes the cuts when there is not enough water to honor a century of promises? Arizona has already committed to saving 1.5 million acre-feet per year and is demanding that the upper basin states accept forced reductions of their own. Tom Bushatsky, the director of Arizona's Department of Water Resources, has been sitting across negotiating tables from the upper basin for years, and his patience has worn through. Arizona is shouldering forced, verified cuts, while other states face only voluntary measures, and Bushatsky is done accepting that imbalance. Arizona has hired a high-powered law firm and sharply boosted its legal budget. If talks fail, this fight moves to federal court. Colorado's water commissioner, Becky Mitchell, pushes back with her own math. The upper basin has never used its full water share. They use roughly 4.5 million acre-feet per year against a paper promise of 7.5 million. The way Mitchell sees it, the upper basin is being asked to solve a problem it did not create with water it does not have. Both sides have a point. That is what makes this so dangerous. And then there is California, holding senior water rights older than every other state's claims, taking no forced cuts under Tier 1. California did reduce its usage to the lowest level since 1949 during the water-saving push of 2023 and 2024, but that was voluntary. Under the current shortage rules, California faces no forced reductions unless Lake Mead drops below 945 feet, a level so disastrous it would mean the system had already failed. That built-in advantage makes California the quietest party in every room where the river's future is being decided, and the most resented. If you are finding this useful, subscribe. We cover geography and water crises like this as they develop, with the full picture you need to actually follow what is happening. While the negotiators trade accusations, the physics of the Colorado River keeps running on its own schedule. Less snow means less melt. Less melt means less inflow to Lake Powell. Less inflow to Lake Powell means less water released downstream to Lake Mead. And less water in Lake Mead pushes Hoover Dam closer to a series of height markers that carry real results for 40 million people. The dam runs on a ladder of increasingly serious levels, and the reservoir is working its way down it right now. At 1,075 feet, forced water cuts kick in for Arizona, Nevada, and Mexico. That level has been active non-stop since 2022. Arizona gives up 512,000 acre-feet per year, roughly 18% of its Colorado River share. Nevada and Mexico take smaller cuts. California takes none. That gap sits at the center of every argument between the states. At 1,050 feet, Tier 2 shortage triggers. Deeper forced reductions. Current forecasts show Lake Mead could cross that 1,050-foot line by July of this year. And here is the cruel math that makes reaching 1,050 feet almost certain without massive action. Lake Mead loses roughly 6 feet of surface height to evaporation alone every year. In the Nevada and Arizona desert, where summer air temperatures routinely top 110 degrees, the reservoir surface acts like a giant open pan, releasing roughly 800,000 acre-feet of water straight into the air. That evaporation loss grows as temperatures climb, and 2026 is on pace to be one of the hottest years on record in the lower basin. Drop another 15 feet to 1,035, and the engineering of the dam itself starts to break down. 12 of 17 turbines must be shut down because of cavitation, a destructive process where air bubbles form when the water pressure drops too low. Power output falls from roughly 1,300 megawatts to just 382, a 70% cut. Current modeling gives a 10% chance of hitting this level by spring of 2027. Below 950 feet, Hoover Dam cannot make any electricity at all. 5 wide-head turbines put in between 2015 and 2016 at a cost of $42 million can run down to this level, but with only a fraction of the dam's designed output. Then comes 895 feet, dead pool. Water no longer flows through the intake pipes by gravity. Nothing goes downstream. Steph McAfee, Nevada's state climatologist, has a way of making that number feel real. 895 feet means water does not flow past the dam anymore. Everything south of Hoover Dam loses its supply. Lake Mead currently sits 27 feet above the turbine shutdown mark and 166 feet above dead pool. Those margins sound comfortable until you look at the direction and the forecasts. The most likely forecast puts Lake Mead at 1,032 feet by November of 2027, nearly 8 feet below the 2022 record low, only 7 feet above the Tier 3 shortage mark, which triggers the deepest cuts in the system. And the forecasts have been getting worse with each monthly update, revised downward by nearly 4 feet in a single month. And now, there is a new kind of failure that nobody who built Hoover Dam in the 1930s could have expected. The water in Lake Mead is warming. Inflow temperatures are on track to run at least 10.8 degrees Fahrenheit above historical averages by fall of 2026. The dam's turbines are cooled with water drawn from the reservoir, and operations face breakdown if that cooling water reaches 78.8 degrees for 3 or more days in a row. Todd Tietjen at the Southern Nevada Water Authority watches these temperature readings climb year over year, running through what happens to the Western power grid if both Glen Canyon Dam and Hoover Dam lose power output at the same time. That scenario is on the forecast charts for late 2026. All of that pressure is landing on a political system that cannot agree on basic math, with a deadline of October 1st that is now less than 6 months away. On January 9th, the federal government released its draft environmental impact statement, laying out 5 options for how the river should be managed after the current deals expire. Some model lower basin cuts of up to 4 million acre-feet per year. Arizona's Central Arizona Project reviewed every option and called them all unacceptable. John Ensminger, Nevada's representative and one of the most experienced water negotiators in the West, has watched the deal-making process collapse in real time. Ensminger is no longer pushing for a full long-term framework. He is pushing for a 5-year bridge deal. Just 5 years of temporary rules to keep the 7 states out of court while they figure out the harder questions. 5 years to buy time on a system that is running out of it. That is how far hopes have fallen. The human cost of this political failure is measured in empty fields, dry ditches, and families making impossible choices. In Pinal County, Arizona, cotton farmer Rodney Shedd and his wife Tiffany are leaving their fields unplanted for the first time in their family's history on that land. They are part of an expected 40% fallowing across roughly 200 farms in the county, farms that have grown cotton, alfalfa, and hay for decades using Colorado River water. Their water share has been cut again and again since Tier 1 shortage kicked in, and this year the numbers finally made planting impossible. Land that was green last spring sits brown and dusty this April. 300 miles upstream, rancher and photographer Pete McBride watches the watering creek that has fed his family's ranch for generations. Last May, at what should have been the height of spring snowmelt, his water commissioner called and ordered him to shut off the ditch. The creek was running almost dry. McBride had never received that call before, and the 0 percentile snowpack feeding that same creek this year is far worse than what triggered that first ever order. Sitting at that same table is Daryl Vigil, water administrator for the Jicarilla Apache Nation, who carries an entirely different kind of authority. His people have kept a relationship with this basin for more than 10,000 years. The framework that governs the river today, the Colorado River Compact, was written in 1922 without a single tribal voice at the table, dividing water that tribal nations held the oldest claims to. Vigil carries a question that cuts straight through the legal fighting. There might be something the modern managers can learn from the people who kept this system working for thousands of years before the dams existed. 40 million people, $1.4 trillion in yearly economic output, two of the largest dams ever built. 7 states locked in a fight that has produced nothing but missed deadlines and legal threats. And a reservoir dropping 3.5 feet per month into a snowmelt season that has almost no snow left to melt. Meanwhile, Lake Powell sits at just 25% full. The most likely forecast puts it below minimum power pool by December. If that plays out, both major dams on the Colorado River lose the ability to produce electricity within months of each other. That has never happened. Glen Canyon Dam alone powers roughly 4.5 million homes across states, and its emergency bypass pipes showed cracking after just 72 hours of non-stop use during a 2023 release. The backup system for the backup system may not hold. Southern Nevada spent $1.3 billion drilling a pumping station intake below dead pool level, making sure Las Vegas can still pull drinking water if every other safety mark fails. The fact that Las Vegas felt it needed to build it tells you everything about where this is heading. October 1st is less than 6 months away. The Bureau of Reclamation will issue its ruling with or without state agreement. The states that feel cheated will file lawsuits. And during every one of those years in court, the river keeps responding to the same inputs it always has: snowpack, temperature, and evaporation. All three are pushing in the same direction. The monitoring stations in the Rockies are still reading 0 percentile snowpack. Lake Mead dropped another 1.5 feet last week. And somewhere between Phoenix and Denver, 7 groups are running out of calendar days faster than the reservoir is running out of water.